This week in the business of tech, are we in a recession? What the data really tells us. Twitter's reporting change brings a key learning. MSP's customers say they're shopping for a new MSP. Congress marches towards privacy legislation, and the answer to who turned INSTEAON back on. All these stories and more. Hit those like, subscribe, and notification buttons and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. I've reported on many changes in the work world, but noticed a new angle on the impact I wanted to review: the courts. Specifically, remote access to the courts. Law 360 recently covered the demands of court watchers, who provide transparency and accountability for the courts by volunteering to observe criminal justice proceedings, and their efforts to keep remote access as the systems transition back to in-person only. Quoting the piece, "The public's access to virtual court proceedings during the pandemic courtroom closures was inconsistent at best," say court watchers. Some judiciaries allowed observers to join Zoom proceedings that included full video and audio access, while others offered only audio live streams that were often plagued with technical problems. Some courts gave the public no way to observe virtual criminal hearings at all. The article then focuses on the benefits of remote access and now upcoming legislation and lawsuits concentrating on preserving the benefits. Why do we care? I'm less interested in this for the specific example than the idea of second-order effects. The move to allow remote access was not made to ease the court watchers' jobs, yet it improved their experience. An unexpected benefit. And thus changes again remove that benefit. Taking away something, even if it was an unexpected boon, is impactful, and that constituency will care. As second-order effects are generally unexpected, they should be considered first-order effects and factor into the decision-making process when you're made aware of them. Take a moment to think if you have intelligence in these areas and factor that in. Meta, known to be working on augmented reality glasses, is reportedly not selling the first version broadly and now has decided to distribute them to software developers to build the technology further and develop specific software experiences. The critical decision is that the product will only be for this reason, as it was considering a broad sales approach for the first version. Why do we care? For all the buzz of the metaverse, some versions of it are proving to be nothing more than vaporware. An immersive version of the metaverse is a long way off, and probably a really long way off. Just as it's critical to track upcoming trends, it's also essential to recognize the ones that are a distraction as quickly as possible. The metaverse is a distraction for most, and far enough away to have plenty of time to pay attention if needed. That's why we care. We now know who turned on INSTEAON servers. Its users. Specifically, a group of users purchased the assets, and the new company posted the following on the INSTEAON website. Most of you discovered that the INSTEAON hubs began coming back online. Our first priority was getting the hubs online immediately before we had access to this site, the email service provider, social accounts, etc. Every day, more customers were giving up hope, so it was critical to get that restored as soon as possible. We are aware that not all functions are back online, but we are actively working on it. We hope you understand this urgency and appreciate your patience. Why do we care? It would be tempting to focus on the communications failure here. That was my first instinct, and it would have been a bad take. I'm not wrong to say this was badly communicated, but that discounts the actual reality of doing a service restoration. You flip the switch to bring the service online first and communicate as quickly as possible. Sure, it would be better to plan it, but as the post observes, it's about the urgency. Let's start this segment with this quote from Axios. You might have heard that we're headed for a recession, or possibly even in one already. If you did, then whoever you heard it from, whether it's JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, or former SEC Chair Harvey Pitt, or multi-platinum recording artist Cardi B, is moonlighting as an economic forecaster. Why this matters? Economic forecasts are ubiquitous, useless, and carry a whiff of the ignoble. If you can ignore them, it generally behooves you to do so. By the numbers, about 55% of Americans currently believe, falsely, that we're in a recession right now, per YouGov, while only around 22% have the true belief that we aren't. U.S. real GDP is on track to grow at 2.8% pace this quarter and a 2.5% pace next quarter, per FactSet estimates. The latest OECD forecast shows 2.5% growth in the U.S. this year and positive growth in all of its 25 member states, as well as the Eurozone at 2.6% and the world at 3%. The SOM rule, a test of whether we're currently in a recession, is in negative territory, implying that we're nowhere near. It needs to be above 0.5 to indicate a recession has arrived. Because in tech, one might be tempted to think things are pretty bad. TechCrunch, with an analysis highlighting that, as of the beginning of June, so far in 2022, a Crunchbase News tally shows more than 17,000 workers were laid off. Of course, to contrast that, Protocol reports that the buzz from RSA last week was more about hiring. Security companies are growing. Why do we care? I've been in that chorus of voices saying I see rough times ahead. Am I buying into the hype? Maybe. Does the data say it? Maybe, and that's the reason to care. The experience appears to be very targeted. Take that layoff data. That's real. Jobs are being lost in portions of tech, linked to the drops in the value of tech companies on the stock market. Let's not be dismissive of that and instead recognize the targeted nature. The Axios advice is smart. Ignore the predictions where you can. Stay close to your customers and track the real-time conditions in your market as they hit you. The turbulence I'm predicting is not necessarily widespread, and most importantly, fundamentals are reliable for a reason. Run your business smartly and watch your numbers. Things will be fine. Twitter redesigned its reporting process for policy violations, and it's now widely available. It uses a symptoms-first reporting flow designed to make it easier to report bad behavior. Here are some details from The Verge. Previously, Twitter's process would ask which policy has been broken, and then ask for more details. Instead, the new flow asks for details on what's happened before getting more granular about which rules may have been broken. Twitter's blog post likened the new process to a doctor asking, "Where does it hurt?" rather than immediately jumping to specifics. Early results from the testing have been positive. Twitter says the number of actionable reports increased by 50% as a result of the new process. Why do we care? I'm not interested in this for the specific Twitter feature, but instead for the approach. It diagnoses the symptoms by asking about the symptoms. I'm left thinking a lot about customer experience here. The previous process made assumptions that users knew the policies. By asking which policy was broken, the user was required to know more about the internal workings of Twitter. Moving to a where does it hurt model removes that requirement from the end user. It's smart. Think about the use of your own interaction with a customer. Do you require your users to know more than they have to about your internal workings? And can you remove that? Some new data from CloudBolt software, which surveyed MSP customers. According to the survey, 80% of MSP customers are shopping for a new provider. Why are they unhappy? Well, an inability to optimize cloud spending at 60%, limited or non-existent multi-cloud options, 58%, inability to better enable cloud automation at 50%, failure to provide visibility into cloud spending at 41%, and inability to automatically remediate spending inefficiencies at 24%. But the respondents also think their MSPs outperform them. 91% believe that their MSPs increased their agility, and 85% felt their MSPs were more successful at digital transformation than they would be alone. 97% of respondents stated that they would be willing to pay more to an MSP that could deliver solutions to these problems. On the other end of the spectrum, the MSP 501 is out from channel futures. Revenue growth rates for 2021 over 2020 for the 501 managed service providers painted a picture of MSP maturity. Total revenue came in at 15%, recurring revenue topped 18%, and profit came in at 15%. That said, the average revenue per MSP on the 501 is $42 million, the median $5.75 million. While reviewing sentiment, a survey by SolarWinds looked at the increased adoption of hybrid IT and cited a rising network complexity as a result. 49% of respondents say they lack visibility into most of their organization's apps and infrastructure. 59% of small businesses surveyed indicated that increased technology requirements from multiple departments were the leading cause of increased complexity. Compare that to 40% of their midsize and 37% of their enterprise counterparts. And U.S. small business confidence dropped in May. The National Federation of Independent Business said its Small Business Optimism Index dipped 0.1 point last month to 93.1. The share of owners expecting better business conditions over the next 6 months hit a record low. Demand for labor remains high. Why do we care? I always like a story, so let's string it together. Broadly, SMBs are worried and they need labor help. They recognize the need for their IT provider, think they are better off with them, but are also shopping for a new provider, mainly due to cloud costs. Of course, the providers are making more money and customers would pay them even more if they delivered on their own cost needs. The costs angle makes sense. If you're worried about inflation, you're concerned about costs. I spoke yesterday about inconsistency. Here's a bit more of it. The safe path is less the optimistic data and more the concerns from customers, which might be overblown in the data. The key takeaway is focusing on the cost versus the value of the delivered solutions. Bloomberg Law took a look at the different approaches to board diversity. Per their analysis, quote, diversity on corporate boards of directors is more likely to be advanced with disclosure rules than specific quotas after a pair of courtroom defeats for California laws that included gender and racial mandates. Disclosure-only laws may impose penalties for failure to report, but because they don't create classifications of people, they have a better chance of surviving equal protection challenges. Why do we care? The lower bar seems to be working. Just openness of the data results in more diversity. Disclosures looks like a winning path. And here's the critical question. Would you be proud of it if you were required to report your leadership diversity data? The Business of Tech will have our quarterly update coming very soon. Are you still using on-prem file servers and VPNs to share files with remote workers? Egnyte is a business-class cloud sharing solution that works more like your on-prem server than other solutions. With a security-first approach to file sharing and collaboration, Egnyte offers multiple options for sharing files and collecting files from outside sources, and do it all addressing data governance and compliance. Want to learn more? Check out egnyte.com/MSP Radio, and when you do, tell them Dave sent you. And pour one out for Internet Explorer. It died today as Microsoft retired the software after nearly 27 years. Why do we care? Well, not much, except as a historical footnote. Users really shouldn't be impacted. It's just a key point in the lineage. Microsoft indicates that the Black Cat ransomware affiliates are actively attacking Microsoft Exchange servers using exploits targeting unpatched vulnerabilities. In at least one incident that Microsoft security experts observed, the attackers slowly moved through the victim's network, stealing credentials and exfiltrating information to be used for double extortion. 2 weeks after the initial compromise using an unpatched Exchange server as an entry vector, the threat actor deployed Black Cat ransomware payloads across the network via PSExec. In April, the FBI warned in a flash alert that the Black Cat ransomware had been used to encrypt the networks of at least 60 organizations worldwide between November 2021 and March 2022. Microsoft advises applying the latest patches. In a new twist, the Roblox online store, part of the gaming platform, was used to sell the decryptor for the Chaos ransomware. Using the in-game currency Robux, a victim can buy the decryptor. Students in New Jersey are escaping exams due to ransomware. Tenafly Public Schools was forced to cancel final exams as they restore systems and respond. One parent indicated that the school's Google Classroom, grading, and other systems were taken offline. Exams were canceled due to teacher concerns that students would be unfairly penalized by being locked out of systems with their notes for a week. And updating on the reporting trends, just 1/4 of all NetWalker ransomware victims reported incidents to law enforcement, according to officials from the FBI and Justice Department who led the group's takedown. That said, the DOJ is reporting that CISA and the FBI are working closely to address upcoming new reporting requirements, and both are very engaged. DOJ and CISA are focused on practical questions during the initial regulatory period, which could last up to 2 years, although CISA intends to move faster than that. Some of the challenges: how should the database be built? How should the information be taken into the database? How should the information in the database be shared with sector risk management agencies and with the FBI? Why do we care? The tactics updates help keep on top of our adversaries, but the main reason to care is to note that CISA and the FBI seem to be in lockstep. That's promising. I was discussing this trend yesterday with someone. Can the US government reduce the security tax on business by simply upping their game from a law enforcement perspective? Suppose the analogy is that gangs of criminals are roaming the streets. In that case, it makes logical sense that the deployment of law enforcement will increase the risks for those criminals and eventually reduce crime. That's the kind of big problem governments are for. A Tuesday hearing over the U.S. privacy laws. The House Energy and Commerce Committee debated privacy legislation, including the American Data Privacy and Protection Act. That one includes several measures, including opt-out of targeted advertising. One key provision: data minimization, which requires companies to limit the collection and retention beyond what is necessary for their operations. That includes the kind of personal information cybercriminals rely on to commit identity theft and other fraud. Why do we care? Well, not a massive forward motion. There's an actual forward motion on federal privacy laws. That's why we care. So far, and has all the signs of happening. Thanks for your time and attention. Time is a finite resource, and I really value you giving me some of yours. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPradio. It's our give what you want model where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this podcast, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary show, The Business of Tech. Available on all your favorite podcatchers with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue button to subscribe. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.